Today we're going to be looking at some of the latest bag and accessory launches from Chanel, believe it or not, which might come as a surprise considering that I don't talk about Chanel that often, but they have just launched their 2025 Metiers D'Art collection, which is one of my most anticipated luxury collections each and every single year. If you'd like to find out why that is and what pieces stood out to me from this year's Metiers D'Art collection that I would suggest considering adding to your very own Chanel collection in case you're in the market for a new Chanel piece, then make sure to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe down below if you haven't done so yet, and keep on marching. Within the heart of Chanel lies a secret world, a realm where exquisite craftsmanship and centuries-old traditions bring dreams to life, which is Metiers D'Art. Pieces from this collection are truly the most exquisitely crafted, detailed, and opulent pieces that are really as close as you can get to couture techniques without the outrageous price tag associated with bespoke haute couture pieces. So there is a difference between Metiers D'Art and haute couture. They are not one and the same. Haute couture pieces are bespoke. Prices usually range between 10 and hundreds of thousands of dollars. Metiers D'Art pieces are not quite that ridiculously priced, but you are getting pieces that have a ton of attention to details and a lot of craftsmanship invested into each and every single one of them, and that's because they are highly dependent on some of the smaller workshops that Chanel has been acquiring since the 1980s. But if you'd like me to do a breakdown on all the different non-traditional shows that Chanel offers and the heritage behind their Coco Neige collection and the Metiers D'Art collection and dive even deeper, let me know and we can definitely do a truth about Chanel video too. But today we're here to talk about this year's Metiers D'Art collection, which the Metiers D'Art show was first introduced in 2002 by Karl Lagerfeld, and each and every single collection pays tribute to a different city. This season, Chanel turns its gaze to China, inspired by Gabrielle Chanel's lifelong fascination with Chinese lacquer screens, pieces that decorated not only her Parisian apartment, but even office, which is a detail that you might also find at Chanel stores, just because Chanel boutiques are basically inspired by Coco Chanel's apartment and office. They take details and little bits and pieces that Coco Chanel was inspired by and they replicate them at Chanel stores, which is just an interesting detail. But this year's collection is inspired by Coco Chanel's favorite lacquer screen that she still has in her office. Even though she's no longer around, the office is still in Paris standing, and that's where one of her favorite screens still stands today, which actually depicts the romantic landscape of the West Lake of Hangzhou, and that's where the fashion show actually took place and the region that this particular collection was inspired by. The reason I wanted to take some time to discuss the inspiration behind this particular collection is so you get a better understanding and hopefully more appreciation for some of the details and some of the rich textures that really beautifully and seamlessly blend French elegance, which is of course what Chanel is known for, with traditional Chinese culture and craftsmanship and some of the iconography that is incredibly common in Chinese culture. I really think that this collection is exquisitely crafted and really beautifully designed. I love the textures, I love the rich tones and hues that they selected for this collection without sacrificing some of the symbolism and some of the DNA that we know and love Chanel for, if you are a lover of Chanel, of course, because as you know, I tend to go through phases, but this particular collection I have a lot of appreciation for. So why don't we start with shoes, as we always do in my What's New in Luxury Fashion videos. As you may know, I am a huge fan of Chanel sneakers. I think that they are by far some of the most comfortable designer sneakers out there. This season, unfortunately, I am not the biggest fan of some of the new textures and shapes that are being introduced when it comes to sneakers, but I'll put in some pictures here in case you're interested. They are of course also doing their classic shoes that you would expect to see from Chanel, so their slingbacks and their ballet flats, but they're offering them in some beautiful, extremely rich and opulent textures like velvet, suede, and even silk, including this new style, which is not one of the classic Chanel styles. It's a new style, but I am a huge fan of this. It is a pair of really low profile pointy ballet flats. These shoes come in two different colors, in a beautiful powdery baby blue, which almost leans lilac, and then it also comes in black with a tiny little CC on it. It's of course not something that I would personally buy for myself, but if you're into ballet flats, this I think is one of those pieces that you can really easily dress up or dress down. I think the classic Chanel ballet flats, as popular as they are, I know a lot of people love them, they tend to lean quite casual, whereas these are definitely something that I could see people dressing up, mainly because of this beautiful sheen that the silk has. And speaking of casual shapes, but in extremely sumptuous textures and finishes, they're also doing their classic Mary Janes in a hand embroidered floral finish, which is a pattern you will see popping up throughout this collection. These Mary Janes are for the Chanel collector. I think these are just under $3,000 because of all the embroidery and all the work that goes into the creation of this piece. Personally, I am not big on floral patterns, but if you're going to do florals, Chanel certainly knows how to do them. And then moving on to their accessories, let's start with one that I think is going to be quite a controversial piece, mainly because of the price. But if you are a true lover of Chanel, if you're a Chanel collector or a Chanel connoisseur, I'm sure it's something that you will be interested in, which is their new mini flap bag. It is a fully functional flap bag, but in an itty bitty back charm size that will set you back over $3,000, considering that it is a fully functional bag. Except it's probably not something that you would carry on its own. It was actually designed to be worn on larger Chanel bags, so on designs like the Chanel 25, which is of course something that we'll move on to in just a bit. And you might be wondering, okay, but where is the inspiration that pays tribute to Chinese culture? Well, of course, it is a flap bag that is very iconic to the house of Chanel, but this particular mini flap bag features a little heart charm that has a Chinese abacus inlay, so basically a traditional calculator, which I think is very sweet, but I don't think it's the detail that will sell this particular creation. For over $3,000, it's not something that I would waste my money on. But if you love Chanel, if you are a big fan of the classic flap, I think it's something that a lot of people will want to jump on. It comes in, I believe, 6 different colors with a tiny little hook that allows you to attach it to some of your already existing Chanel bags. And if you're into the whole Jane Birkinifying your bag, if you're into over accessorizing your creations, which is a trend that we recently did a video on, which I can make sure to link up here for you, this could certainly be the crown jewel of your bag charm collection. Something that I would much rather spend my money on at Chanel, just because I have made the mistake of buying into these bag-inspired bag charms. You may remember that I bought the Kelly bag charm when it first launched in 2020, I think it was, and I can tell you what a waste of money that purchase was. Anyway, something that I think is a much better piece to buy from Chanel is a passport case. They are doing this beautiful pearl gray caviar leather passport case with a vintage looking CC detail. This is something that again will set you back quite a bit of money. I think this is over $700. But what's great about Chanel passport cases is that they have some built-in card slots, so you can not only use them as a passport case, but you can also put your immigration documents in there, your frequent flyer cards, or if you have specific credit cards that you use when traveling, this is a great way to keep all your bits and pieces in one place. Although you might want to be careful with going for such a light colored passport holder, because it's something that will go through quite a bit as life goes on, but I do think it is a really special piece. Moving on to items that are somewhere in between a bag and an SLG. Technically, if you ask Chanel, they are considered an SLG, but they are definitely a lot more accessibly priced than a traditional SLG would be, and I do think they add a little bit more to your collection than something like a basic card holder would. A piece that is very much inspired by Chinese culture is this really fun lantern clutch or pochette, let's call it, which is made of a really soft, malleable lambskin, and it has a fun little tassel on it, and then you have a little chain that allows you to carry it as a clutch bag, which I think is quite fun. I'm actually quite surprised that this is something that's only available in black, because I think this would have been the perfect piece to introduce in gold or a metallic shade like silver. But of course it goes really well with the code of the house of really using monotone colors and shades. So if you love a special shape, something that is slightly reminiscent of a pencil case, this could be quite an interesting piece to have in your collection. And then something that you'll definitely be familiar with if you know and love Chanel, it is their vanity case inspired little mini bags. They have one that looks like a little bento box, even though bento box is Japanese. That's kind of what this piece reminds me of. And it comes in a really glossy high shine patent leather. It's available in a few different colors, and it also has a built-in mirror as well as a longer chain that allows you to carry it basically as a glorified card holder, because there really isn't much more that you would be able to fit into these pieces. In fact, don't quote me on it, because this piece is square, so you would definitely have to check whether you can fit a card into this or not. If you can fit a card, I can kind of see the point of it, but if it doesn't even fit a card, I think it's kind of pointless. But if you are a fan of these vanity cases, let us know your experience with them. And Chanel continues to offer vanity cases not only in these itty bitty mini sizes, but they're also doing some larger hard shell trunks, which at one point they did quite a lot of. And I think Chanel went through a phase of not really offering any vanity cases, and that's when these pieces blew up on the secondary market. These vintage vanity cases were selling for $10, $20, even $30,000 if they were in great condition from the 90s, but they have started offering them again, and some of them even come with chains. So if you really want to, you can actually carry them out as a handbag. And this collection, they have quite a few hard shell trunks, but the vanity cases are definitely the ones that I think are going to be most popular this upcoming season. I don't know if I would necessarily call this its own collection within the family of Chanel, but let's just call it a new range. So Chanel is offering a new range of bags, classic bag styles, but in a new finish, which actually blends suede with the house's iconic lambskin, and the suede is in beige, whereas the lambskin is offered in black, which is of course a very iconic combination that we've been seeing from Chanel for decades, the combination of beige with black, which not a lot of brands would combine because the contrast tends to be quite stark, but it's something that Chanel has been doing since the 80s and 90s, and they are extremely well known for. As soon as I see this combination of colors, I immediately think of Chanel, and I think they did an incredible job with suede and lambskin. You know that I am a sucker for anything and everything suede, even though it's not something that I have a lot of in my collection. And I love the fact that they actually tried to quilt suede, because it's not something you will see very often from other brands. So they have this new collection that combines suede with leather. They not only have SLGs in this collection, in case you want to test it, but they also have larger bags, including a larger shopper, which I do quite like. But my favorite piece from this collection is again this piece that's somewhere between an SLG and a full-on bag. It's kind of like almost like an elongated take on the mini bolide or the Louis Vuitton Alma. It has this really cute rounded shape and two smaller handles, but because we are talking about a Chanel bag, of course it will come with its very own chain. And with that, let's move on to some of the seasonal bags that Chanel is offering for this current season. And then of course at the end we'll look at some of their classic styles, including the classic flap that they are doing in some special finishes and textures. But the first bag I wanted to really get your thoughts on is an extremely simple flat sort of pouch bag. It does come with a longer chain handle slash strap. It's not long enough for you to put this back crossbody. I don't really think that it would really suit this style. I don't think this is something that you would want to carry crossbody, but the chain handles are long enough for you to put them under your arm, but it was carried as a grab and go pouch bag on the runway, which I think is the most aesthetic way of carrying this bag, just because it's so flat and so kind of soft and squishy. It kind of looks like a pillowcase, to be honest. It also has a quilting, but the quilting isn't actually done with stitches. It's almost as if the quilting was embossed into the bag, and because it's offered in silk, it actually goes really well with some of these cheap pow inspired robes and cardigans that Chanel is offering this season. I think it blends beautifully with the collection, but as a piece that you would want to style with other pieces and other textures in your collection, I'm really not sure if this is the best piece to spend your money on, considering that silk is not the most hard wearing, and it is one of those pieces that I think might be a little bit more difficult to style, especially considering the price. I think the larger one out of the two will set you back just under $6,000. I want to say it's $5,700, and even though it comes in a handful of different shades, including black and a beautiful pastel light green, to me it is more of an acquired finicky piece that really is just not meant for everyday use. If you are buying an entire look from this collection, if you love bags in really unique textures and finishes, it's certainly something interesting for you to look into. But if you are a novice and you are really carefully trying to collect your collection, I don't really think that this is the best piece to spend your money on. A seasonal bag, however, that I actually think feels fresh and unexpected without it looking or feeling too specific is this new cuff bag that Chanel is doing for the season. I didn't actually remember seeing this piece on the runway, even though it was very heavily featured in the runway show. When I first saw the pictures of this bag, I actually thought that it would be a lot smaller than it actually is. I had to go back and look at the runway pictures to get an idea for how big it actually is. And it's actually a lot bigger than I thought it would be, because it is called the cuff bag. So the idea is that you can fasten the bag and just really gently slide it on your wrist and wear it as a bracelet almost, which definitely reminded me of the idea of the Loewe bracelet bag, which is a lot smaller. This, on the other hand, is quite a bit bigger, and you also get a removable chain strap, which allows you to carry it as a crossbody bag. This bag to me is incredibly sweet. It kind of looks like a little dumpling, and as I mentioned, you can either wear it crossbody or you can wear it on your wrist, or with the fastening, you can actually hold onto this bag as a clutch bag. It comes in black and white, and it will set you back $5,300, which is of course a pretty penny. But if you are a Chanel collector, you love your Chanel pieces, and you're looking for something a little bit more out of the ordinary, but not something that's too far-fetched, this I actually think is an amazing design to have in your collection that you can definitely do quite a lot with. How could I do a video talking about Chanel bags in 2025 without at least mentioning the Chanel 25 bag, which is of course named after the year it was born, which is 2025. This bag has quickly become one of the most popular, most sought after bags, luxury bags of 2025, and it kind of feels like a piece that's really not that new. It kind of feels like one of those pieces that's been around forever, and there is a reason for that. It's very much inspired by some of Chanel's archival pieces from the 90s, and it is just such an obviously Chanel bag. It borrows so much from the Chanel DNA, from the quilting through the CC hardware all the way to the chain detail, without the bag looking aged, dated, and too preppy. As popular as the Chanel Classic Flap is, I feel like it is quite a specific look. It's not something that a lot of people can seamlessly fit into their collections at this point, considering that most people dress a lot more casually and a lot more laid back than they once did. And even though the Chanel Classic Flap is something you can play around with, and some people will argue that it will never look out of place, I would say otherwise. But what I really liked about the Chanel 22 bag, for example, is that it stood out from other Chanel bags because of how casual and effortless it was, while staying true to the heritage of the brand. And really the same goes for the Chanel 25 bag, even though it's very different from what the Chanel 22 would add to your collection. It still feels really effortless, casual, and laid back, without again betraying what Chanel is known for. The more I see this bag, the more I like it. It's not something that I see myself carrying just because of the shape. The shape is not something that appeals to me. Also, there is just a little bit too much CC hardware for my liking, but I can definitely appreciate it on others. And in honor of the Metiers Dart collection, they are introducing this style in some beautifully lush, rich tones and even textures. The most eye-catching out of the bunch, in my opinion at least, is the smaller 25 bag, which you can pick up in an extremely expensive and rich looking aged gold shade in caviar leather, which is truly for those who are looking to make a statement. And I actually think it blends really nicely with this more laid back look of the bag. It doesn't look odd or disjointed. I think this particular shade of gold goes beautifully with the shape of this bag. It kind of reminds me of another Metiers Dart collection. My favorite collection from Chanel ever created was their Egyptian collection, which also featured some gold pieces, but this gold is quite different. It feels a little bit more antiqued and a little bit darker and deeper, but you are still going to start conversations with this particular piece, but it's going to set you back a pretty penny. This bag is $6,000, which to be honest is not actually as bad as I thought it would be. But if you prefer the larger 25 bag for this season, it's available in burgundy and also a dark beige, which as we discussed is very iconic to the house of Chanel. And they're also going to be doing the smaller 25 in a pink tweed, which as much as I love tweed bags, I would personally try to stay away from. But speaking of tweed, let's move on to some of the new flatback finishes that Chanel is doing for 2025 Metiers Dart. As you know, I do like the idea of the flat bag, but exclusively in unique finishes, because to me the flat bag just feels like one of those pieces that we've seen, we've done, and at this point there isn't too much newness to it. There are so many of these bags out there, fake or real, dupes or replicas. It is just a little bit predictable in my personal opinion, not to mention that I don't think it's one of those pieces that you can dress up or dress down as easily as some people think, but that is just my personal opinion. But if you are going to do a flat bag in 2025, I think the way to go is to get it in a unique finish or a unique texture, like sequin, like tweed, or even suede or velvet. They're also doing a lot of velvet bags in this collection, but the ones I wanted to point out to you are their sequin bags. So they are doing some flat bags in a tweed-like blend of light pink, green, and yellow, fully encrusted with sequins. And then they're also doing a similar sequin bag in gold and black with a camellia print. As you know, I am not the biggest fan of the camellia print. To me, it just feels, I don't know if it feels childish or retirement home. I'm not sure which extreme we are leaning into, but on this continuum, they are definitely at one of the ends. I don't know what it is about the camellia, but it's just personally not for me. So I would personally point you in the direction of that tweed-like sequin. And the reason I keep saying tweed-like is because it has a similar effect to tweed, even though the bag is fully made of sequins, but because of the blend of these different tones, you get a similar effect that you would get with tweed. But just keep in mind that these sequin bags are quite delicate. However, not nearly as delicate as some of the demi-couture bags, some of the most exceptional, most expensive flat bags that money can buy, which of course we always get a few of in the Metiers Dart collection, because truly this is Chanel's chance to run wild with their imagination and exceed limits, both when it comes to pricing and how much time and effort can be invested into a single piece, into a single classic flap, because they always do some really excessively designed and excessively detailed flap bags. But this season, they've taken it to the next level. They have some classic flaps that depict the natural scenery of Hangzhou's Westlake region with over 30,000 sequins that took more than 150 hours to embroider onto these bags. They have a few different designs, but my personal favorite is this maroon sequin bag, which I believe is just around 30,000 euros. In fact, I'm pretty sure it's exactly 30,000 euros. And then they have one in black with some flowers. I'm not exactly sure if these are lotus flowers or camellia, but they have a black sequin bag that again is encrusted with over 30,000 individual pieces of sequin, which will set you back 29,000 euros. So it's definitely not for the faint of heart. It is for the true Chanel collector. And if that's who you are, don't forget about these creations. And I'm sure you will need no introduction to Chanel's Minute d'Air bags, which are always the brand's most talked about, most eye-catching pieces. They're usually a solid resin bag that are almost like a wearable piece of art. It's almost like a little sculpture that you get to take on the go with you. And they're always very closely inspired by the theme of the collection. So they've done things like shipping containers, which is, by the way, my favorite Chanel bag ever created. They've done projectors. They've done, what else do I remember seeing that I really liked? I also really loved they have a gondola, a ski gondola that I thought was really special. They've done some incredible things. I think the most popular one is probably that little stackable doll that they did at one point. They've done some really cool things. This collection, these bags were quite underwhelming in my opinion, at least, because I don't think they took full advantage of the rich culture and heritage that China has. I mean, there are so many incredible symbols and folklore that they could have taken advantage of. Instead, this season, they used one of Chanel's forever inspiration, which is the 5-pointed star. So they are doing two solid bags, one that's actually star shaped, which I think is around 20, I think that bag is 19,000 euros, and it's just basically a star shaped bag. And then there is a spherical bag, which again features some stars and some larger CC to create this sort of cagey mesh look, which is encrusted with crystals. Personally, to me, these bags are quite underwhelming. Again, I feel like this was a missed opportunity to take advantage of the rich culture and the rich symbolism that China and Chinese culture has to offer. But I would love to hear what you have to say. What do you think about this year's Metiers d'Art collection? Are there any pieces that piqued your interest? Have you seen this collection? Because, by the way, this collection is already in store. So if you like any one of these pieces, make sure that you make your way to your local Chanel boutique sooner rather than later. But I would love to hear what you have to say. Are you planning on picking anything up from this collection? If not, what else are you currently thinking about adding to your luxury collection? And just let me know what you think about the Metiers d'Art collection in general. I cannot wait to hear from you. And while you're down there sharing your thoughts, make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't done so yet. I really appreciate you being here and watching, and I will see you back here with a new video really, really soon.